The Golden State Warriors can't actually get even better, right? You're not going to tell me this team is about to get even better.
21, their defense has looked better the last two possessions.
Well, they are about to add back this guy who I've heard is kind of okay.
For NBA history, he got it! 14 threes in a game!
But everyone has been waiting on the return of Klay Thompson for 2 straight years now. And trust me, there's a good reason for that. However, the Warriors also have this guy coming back as well.
This reserve unit getting the job, and Wiseman with a block. You see the help and recover there from Wiseman on the handle. Wiseman down the lane. Wiseman to the rim!
In the Warriors' most recent loss to the Phoenix Suns, there were a few takeaways. Steph Curry had a bad game, a very bad game that I expect to never see again from Stephen Curry. That was an anomaly. The Phoenix Suns are a very good basketball team, and DeAndre Ayton's size and athleticism was very, very effective against the Warriors' defense. Prior to the game against Phoenix, the Warriors looked as though they had very few weaknesses, if any at all. Maybe you could have questioned the shooting, maybe you could have questioned some of the role players, but they were going to add back one of the greatest shooters of all time, and this was a team that was already shooting the ball fantastically. I mean, the Warriors are the best defense in the NBA by a mile, the 3rd ranked offense, and have the best net rating. So it's safe to say when you pair this with the greatest point guard of all time, yes, I said that, the greatest point guard of all time, and the MVP favorite for a reason, they didn't appear to have many weaknesses, if any at all. However, what the Phoenix game showed us is if there is a weakness, it is the lack of size and athleticism at the center position, which allowed DeAndre Ayton to dominate that game. Luckily for the Warriors, they've got an ultra-athletic, ultra-talented 7-footer entering his 2nd year, about to re-enter the lineup and maybe prove to be the final piece to the Warriors puzzle, which I don't think anyone expected to be the case before the year started. Now, I just want to take you guys back to July 15th of this year. Before the season started, there were a lot of rumors about potential trades involving James Wiseman. However, instead of entertaining these kind of rumors, in an interview, Steve Kerr said James Wiseman could be the Warriors' DeAndre Ayton. Now, what does this mean? Well, this is a really interesting comparison because Ayton was a guy that had a lot of doubters through his first couple of seasons in the league, despite putting up good numbers. People questioned whether he was fit for the modern NBA, given his lack of shooting, and whether he could be the anchor of a defense. Since then, he's gone on to be a guy that has been associated with winning and has been seen as a winning player that can not only be the anchor of a great defense, but contribute at a very high level in the playoffs as a young big. Steve Kerr didn't just compare these two for no reason. This was no coincidence. Steve Kerr sees what James Wiseman was perceived as in his first year. James Wiseman was heavily criticized, similar to DeAndre Ayton, despite putting up pretty good numbers as a rookie, despite not playing a ton of minutes and coming off an injury. People wanted to talk about his ability to not really fit into the Warriors system that prioritizes ball movement and shooting, and whether he was the right selection, instead of focusing on the positives, and I think that's exactly what Steve Kerr sees, and the comparison between him and DeAndre Ayton. Now, I'll revisit that a little bit later about how James Wiseman could be the Warriors' DeAndre Ayton and how he could be the missing piece. But before I do that, we just need to understand what James Wiseman does well, because as I mentioned, everyone seemed so focused on everything James Wiseman couldn't do as a rookie, trying to play in a pretty hard system in Golden State on a team that wasn't doing fantastically well, instead of focusing on what James Wiseman can do very well. And when I tell you he can do one particular thing very well, I'm not exaggerating. As a rookie, still trying to figure things out in the NBA, he was already one of the best finishers in basketball. One of the best finishers in the entirety of the NBA, and that is no exaggeration. As a rookie, James Wiseman shot 74% at the rim on over 4 attempts a game. For context, out of players who attempted more than 4 shots a game at the rim, there were only 3 players who had a higher percentage: Michael Porter Jr., DeAndre Jordan, and the one and only Giannis Antetokounmpo. The thing is with Wiseman, he's already such a great finisher because of his versatility as a finisher. You see a guy like DeAndre Jordan up in that list, but we know his main threat is just catching lobs. Wiseman can do that, and I'll talk about that in a second, but he's also capable of putting the ball on the floor, spinning past a defender, or using a combination of hooks and layups to finish inside at an incredibly high rate as just a rookie. I think the scariest part is the Warriors didn't even utilize James Wiseman in the pick and roll a ton, and I think coming into this season, that is going to change, and I'm about to tell you why. Now, if you look at what James Wiseman was in the pick and roll, he was in the 50 percentile, which is decent. It's okay. It's not fantastic, but for a rookie on an offense that wasn't really tailored to him, that's not too bad. If you just look at what this Warriors team could be if they ran a few more pick and rolls with James Wiseman, you look at the gravity of Stephen Curry as one of the best pick and roll ball handlers in the league, that is fantastic. We all know about what Steph Curry can do and what that partnership could look like. But there are two major reasons why I'm kind of frightened as to what the Warriors' potential could be with Wiseman in the lineup. I think we can all agree that Wiseman will likely come off the bench to start in his return, and another player that is going to have to move to the bench with Klay Thompson returning, despite playing incredibly well, is Jordan Poole. Now, I'm going to give you a chance to guess who is the Warriors' most efficient pick and roll ball handler. If you guessed Stephen Curry, you were very close, and he's one of the best in the league. But you know who's even better so far on the season, statistically? It's Jordan Poole. Yes, Jordan Poole is nearly in the top 90 percentile of ball handlers, one of the best pick and roll ball handlers in the NBA. And you're partnering him with an athletic 7-foot monster that is only going to get better, and they're both going to be coming off the bench with Jordan Poole already established himself as a 20-point per game scorer. Do you see where this is getting a little bit scary? But I'm not even done yet, because last season James Wiseman had to deal with what was a lack of spacing. Apart from the GOAT himself, there was not enough shooting for the most part when Wiseman was playing. However, this season, Jordan Poole is at a different level. You now have the bench unit, which would consist of the likes of Damian Lee, Otto Porter Jr., and then even Gary Payton II and Bjelica. You've got shooting around James Wiseman. You've got ball handling, and you've got an offense that is flowing incredibly well, with Wiseman having the chance to learn from the likes of Draymond and Iguodala and all of these great veterans while he's out of the lineup. Oh, not to mention, James Wiseman can shoot threes, and he can shoot from the mid-range. Do you remember when you guys would sit there biting your fingernails wondering when Stephen Curry was going to return after being subbed, often cursing out Steve Kerr for not subbing him in quick enough, and the game slipping away the instant Steph Curry left the game? It was rinse and repeat. Now, we've already seen major improvements this season, but this partnership off the bench with the potential of Jordan Poole and James Wiseman alongside some shooting and some much improved veterans in the lineup, this could go from the Warriors being a team where teams couldn't wait for their bench unit to come in to now teams not wanting to see the Warriors bench or the Warriors starters. You pick your poison. You go from Steph, Draymond, Klay, and Wiggins to then James Wiseman, Jordan Poole, Otto Porter Jr., and a host of guys that are capable of making plays on any given night. Oh, it's just, what are we doing right now? Now, you might think to yourself, isn't this a lot of pressure to put on a 20-year-old just returning from injury? That's the beauty. There is no pressure. People have forgotten about James Wiseman. People literally don't talk about James Wiseman. They're talking about Klay Thompson and how good the Warriors are already without Klay Thompson, which is one thing in itself. But what about how James Wiseman could come back and make an impact? No one is talking about how the Warriors need James Wiseman, but I'm talking about what he could do as a player for this team. And with no expectations, think of Michael Porter Jr. a couple of years ago when he burst onto the scene for Denver. He'd struggled with injuries, everyone knew his talent, and he was coming into a team with an excellent player like Nikola Jokic and guys around him. And it took him a little while, but once he got up to speed, he turned into that player that we all know he could be. I think there is definitely some comparisons between a guy with a lot of talent going to a team after struggling with injuries his first year and a bit. That's what I would just like to point out. Now, just before I finish the video, let's get back to the original topic. What could James Wiseman do that resembles DeAndre Ayton? And I think it starts with the side of the ball that I haven't even talked about. Offensively, James Wiseman has ridiculous potential. He's already going to make an impact. He made an impact last year offensively with his rim rolling, with his ability to catch lobs and finish at the rim at a very, very high level. We know that. We know he's going to be a good offensive player, but defensively, well, that's where the wild card is. That's where the X factor is, because we saw what DeAndre Ayton could do. There's the likes of Anthony Davis, Nikola Jokic, Karl Anthony Towns. If you look across the league, the big man is well and truly back. And for a team like the Warriors, they've got versatility at that position. You've got Bjelica, someone who could stretch the floor and give you some different looks on offense. You've got Kevon Looney, the reliable screen setter and defender. You've got Draymond, the wild card that can do a little bit of everything as a small ball 5. And then you add into the mix the ultra-athletic 7-footer that can block shots and maybe match the physical strengths of someone like a DeAndre Ayton, a Karl Anthony Towns, people of that nature. Am I saying James Wiseman is going to come in as a second-year player, play 40 minutes a night, and lock up those guys? I am not saying that. But what I am saying is, in a league that constantly needs more and more versatility, to have someone like this as someone that's just up your sleeve, that's something that is huge for the Warriors and should be getting talked about a little bit more than it is, because we saw what could happen with the Suns when you have a big man like DeAndre Ayton. We've seen that in the playoffs, and we've now seen it in a game against the Warriors. You add in James Wiseman, there's some serious X factor to that, and he could just make this team even better. That's what I wanted to talk about. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like, subscribe, have a good day. Bye.